I never intended to reveal my true identity to my family. For 3 years I worked as a butler at the Richardson Grand Hotel, which was our family's pride and joy, and secretly served as the CEO of Lux Global Hotels, the third largest hotel chain in the world. But family always pushes you beyond your limits, especially when they think you are inferior to them. My Uncle Thomas inherited the hotel from my grandfather and grew it from an average local hotel to a respected regional hotel that is struggling in today's market, not only lagging behind modern hospitality trends, but accumulating debt that my uncle refuses to acknowledge. I felt my heart skip a beat when the name of the Grand Richardson appeared on our list of targets. The Richardson family seemed to be refusing to sell, and my CFO reported that they were already in debt but were unwilling to admit that in 6 months, maybe a year, they would be forced to sell for less than their current value. So I did what any secret CEO would do. I applied for a job as a housekeeper. Why do you want to work here? The HR people were puzzled by my application and asked me about your degree from Cornell University School of Hospitality Management and how I believe in starting at the bottom, to which I replied that I knew that they wouldn't understand the full truth of those words. My cousin Bradley, Thomas' uncle's son and current manager of the hotel, never misses an opportunity to remind me that Grace, the bathroom in room 306, needs attention. He is on the phone across the lobby making sure that the guests can hear his commands to his own cousin. Don't take all day. This time, I completed every task, perfectly gathering information that will prove invaluable later on. Every single leaky pipe, every outdated system, every guest complaint, I documented it all, but no one noticed. They were all too busy looking down their noses at the taciturn housekeeper. And last Tuesday, at a business meeting of the Munhaley family, that all changed. Uncle Thomas was sitting at the table. His wife Margaret was sitting next to him. Bradley was standing at the front of the room, bouncing with excitement, ready to announce his plans as everyone knew. He began to straighten his tie. The hospitality industry is constantly evolving, and we need to modernize in order to compete with the big hotel chains. I almost choked on my water. The strategy he presented was almost an exact copy of one that I had implemented 2 years ago at Lux Global. He must have found the strategy in some trade publication and appropriated it. The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was talking about me. And now Aunt Bradley Margaret was hypocritically saying that Grace was family. Maybe we could find her another position in the laundry room. Or maybe I sat quietly and watched as my cousin's plan unfolded, and for 3 years his subtle taunts and not-so-subtle humiliations had led to this moment where he wanted to fire me in front of the entire family, proving once and for all that he was the one who had succeeded, the rightful head of the Grand Richardson Hotel. He turned to me with a smile on his face and said, "Grace, here is your official notice that we need you to return your uniform by Friday." I could have revealed everything on the spot. I could have pulled out my cell phone and shown them the profile of Lux Global with my picture and the title of CEO. I could have mentioned that my time off was actually spent managing a company with over 200 hotels around the globe. But instead I stood up, slowly smoothed out my butler's uniform, smiled and said, "Of course, Bradley. Of course, Bradley, I totally understand." I turned to leave and then paused in the doorway. "Oh, congratulations. The rebranding strategy worked so well when it was implemented 2 years ago at Lux Global that they wondered as I left how a butler could have known that detail. And I left to the sound of Bradley babbling on about his excuses for his original plan. I spent that night in my small apartment above the local coffee shop, finalizing the details of what was going to happen next. My cell phone kept buzzing with a steady stream of messages from family members, some expressing concern about my dismissal, others warning me not to make a scene. As I hit send, I couldn't help but smile at the thought that tomorrow Bradley, who always said I needed to know my place in the hospitality industry, would know in a minute exactly what my place was. 000 a.m. My heels clacked on the marble lobby floor, and my arrival caused guests and staff alike to turn a sideways glance. "Excuse me." Miss Bradley's voice came from behind the front desk. Miss Bradley's voice came from behind the front desk. "May I help you?" His voice faded as I turned around. The elevator dinged and out stepped my executive team, Thomas Wright, my CFO, Sarah Martinez, our head of operations, and Michael Chang, our chief legal officer, who had been running Lux Global with me for the past 3 years via video calls and late-night meetings. 30 minutes later, my family is sitting in the same conference room where I was fired yesterday, but the power dynamics have changed dramatically. with my executive team sitting on one side of the table and the Richardsons on the opposite side, looking like they've seen a ghost. Let me get this straight. I started standing at the table where Uncle Thomas usually sits. For the past 3 years, I have been working here as a housekeeper, along with being the CEO of Lux Global Hotels. And every break I take is not to be lazy, as Bradley often says, but to be managing a company with over 200 hotels around the world. Aunt Margaret whispers that you are just a maid, and I do her job for her. And that is why this job is so perfect, and you believe in my insignificance, and none of you will Google my name or question why a Cornell graduate would. Choose to be a housekeeper. I opened my laptop and projected onto the screen a series of documents from my time working here. I recorded every health code violation, every instance of deferred maintenance, every questionable accounting practice. Uncle Thomas's head turned to his son Bradley. Is this true, Dad? I can explain, and before he can make up another lie, I'll go on. The Richardson Hotel is 3 months away from bankruptcy. In short, this hotel is going under. The room is silent. The truth of 3 years of hardship is laid bare in a flash. Why does Uncle Thomas finally speak? His voice is barely a whisper. If you're really who you say you are, why are you working as a housekeeper? I can't just stand by and watch it go under. I have to figure out what went wrong before I can help fix it. Bradley scoffed, finding his voice again. We don't need your help? I still don't believe you're really Sarah. As my family pored over the documents, their expressions ranging from disbelief and shock to eventual understanding, I laid out their options. Lux Global was prepared to make an offer to buy Richardson Grand. A very generous offer considering its current financial situation. Either do what Uncle Thomas wants, or I'll go away as both steward and potential buyer. But let me remind you that the next company that makes an offer won't care about preserving your legacy. They'll bulldoze it and build a new hotel. You could have said something. Would you have believed me, I ask you in a low voice? Or would you have thought that it was just a maid's nonsense? The silence that ensued would have been enough if it hadn't been accepted. The Grand Richardson will be the flagship hotel of our new Classic Hotels division. I shrugged my shoulders. I heard the real estate developer made a good offer for the land. I turned to leave when Bradley's voice called out to me, wait a minute. The rebranding strategy I proposed yesterday is a carbon copy of my initiative from 2 years ago. Yes, I know. The next time you decide to plagiarize someone else's work, Bradley makes sure that they're not in the room. The next 24 hours were intense. My phone was on silent as my family processed everything they learned. 0:00 a.m. The next morning, Uncle Thomas called me to say that we accepted his apology, and his voice was full of emotion. But Grace, I want to know, can you forgive us? I thought of all the times they had dismissed me, looked down on me, and treated me as less than family. But I also thought of my grandfather, who taught me that true leadership is not about revenge, but about making things better. The transformation of the hotel took 6 months, and Bradley was transferred to our hotel in Miami, starting as an assistant manager where he could learn the business. Well, Uncle Thomas retired but stayed on as a consultant, his decades of experience finally coming in handy without the stress of managing an entire hotel. I stood in the newly renovated lobby, watching guests check in at the gilded front desk, the crystal chandelier overhead sparkling back to its former glory. I turned to her and asked curiously, you could have just bought this hotel 3 years ago, or you could have forced us out, but instead you chose to learn about it from the ground up, about every detail, every problem, every possibility for improvement. As I watched another happy family check in, I thought about everything that had happened in the last 3 years. How underestimated I had been, how I had cleaned rooms while running a global company, how I had gritted my teeth in countless family meetings. Was it all worth it? I straightened my suit jacket and walked to my office, where Brad had called me to clean the bathrooms, which was now the command center for the Grand Richardson and the Richardson Hotel. On my desk was a framed picture of my grandfather standing proudly in front of his newly opened hotel, next to my old butler's uniform, preserved in a shadow box with a small plaque that read, "Never forget where you started," which I would never forget because sometimes the best way to lead is not from the top down, but from the inside out. And sometimes the quietest person in the room was the person you should be watching the most closely. In my case, I still occasionally put on my steward's uniform and spend the day working with our staff. It keeps my feet on the ground. It keeps me in touch with the things that matter most in this industry. And it's the little details that make a hotel feel like home.